Hello and welcome to this lesson on the Bodhicaryavatara, chapter 7, translated as the perfection of vigor, the Virya Paramita, and in this video we'll be looking at verse 2. As before, it will be helpful for you to have the analysis that I've done of this. Here we are, I'll just show it to you on screen. There we are. Which is now, at the time of dictating this, available on the same platform. You will find this on my Google Drive, along with the PDF notes that I've made, and again we'll be making for this on the Notability app on the iPad. So I'll remove this from the screen. As before, I will read the verse slowly in Sanskrit twice, and then we'll proceed to the detailed analysis of it. Kim viryam kutsalotsāha tadvipaksha ka uchyate alasyam kutsita sakti vishadatmavamanyana. And again, kim viryam kutsalotsāha tadvipaksha ka uchyate alasyam kutsita sakti vishadatmavamanyana. So this opens by saying, what is virya? Viryam, in its nominative form, is a neuter noun, and so the question what, the question word what, has to be put in the neuter. In the masculine it is ka, and in the feminine it is ka, and in the neuter it is kim, and with a subdotted m if it's followed by a word beginning with a consonant. So, for example, we have the word vishada lower down. If you want to say what is despondency in Sanskrit, you would say ko vishada, because the with the visarga followed by a word beginning with a voiced consonant. Voiced consonant. Voiced consonant changes to also ko vishada. And if you wanted to say what is self-contempt, atmavamanyana, that's a feminine word, so you would say ka atmavamanyana. In fact, you'd run them together, ka atmavamanyana. So anyway, viryam is a neuter noun, and so it takes the neuter, right there, man, neuter, takes the neuter kim. Incidentally, although it's an interrogative adjective, what is, so on, interrogative pronoun, also the word kim just generally meaning what, without being attached to any particular noun. What are you talking about? That is just kim as well, using that neuter form. So kim viryam, what is virya? Note again here that the is left out. Sorry, I've just realized I've forgotten to share my screen. Silly me, I'll bring it up for you. There we are. I hope you haven't missed too much. That's just the masculine, feminine, and neuter for the pronoun and adjective what. Ka, and kim. Kim viryam, what is vigor? And I was saying here, literally it's just what vigor, meaning what is vigor. As very often happens, Sanskrit and Pali, the equational is, what is this, can simply be left out. Kim viryam, kutsalotsāhas. Kuśalotsāhas. This is kuśala, meaning skillful or wholesome. In Pali, kuśala, kuśalotsāha, skillful means kuśala upaya, becomes kuśalotsāha. Skillful means skillful or wholesome. It's also a noun. It's a neuter noun. When used as a noun, it's a neuter noun. So it's kuśalam and kusalam in Pali. So kutsalotsāha, skillful endeavor. The words kuśala and utsāha are run together into a compound, and so the final a of kuśala merges with the first u of utsāha. They merge into an o, and that's regular sandhi. So utsāha. So the a plus the u merge into an o. That becomes kuśalotsāha. This compound could be one of two things. It could be kuśala as an adjective and utsāha as a noun, just then meaning wholesome or skillful endeavor. It could, by the laws of grammar, equally be a compound consisting of two nouns, treating kuśala as a noun, not an adjective, and utsāha as before as a noun. And in that case, it would not mean skilled or skillful endeavor. It would mean the skillfulness endeavor, meaning the endeavor to do what is skillful, the endeavor towards the kuśalam, the endeavor towards that which is skillful or wholesome. Linguistically, they're both equally valid in interpretations. And as so often happens in Pali and Sanskrit, you don't have to say, well, it's either that or it's that. Very often, the mind of the listener will understand them both at the same time without necessarily having to make a strict binary choice. Is it one or the other? It's not necessarily that binary. You'll tend to find that the commentators say it's that rather than that. And this very frequently happens, especially with the Pali commentators. They tend, maybe I'm doing them an injustice and I don't really know a huge amount about it, but I know enough about it to see that very frequently they will say, of these two possible meanings, that is the correct one. They will be making what many would regard, and I often do regard it, as the mistake of not allowing the dual possibility, the two dual possibilities to coexist. They often do coexist, and we can often hold them in our minds at the same time, unless they're inconsistent. There's no inconsistency here. They're just two possibilities coexisting, either skillful endeavor or a skillfulness endeavor, meaning the endeavor towards that which is skillful or wholesome. Now, you will see that kuśalotsāha is written with the final S, again by sandhi, since the word that ends in an a followed by another word beginning in a t, that changes to S. That's where in this verse, the next half verse, and it's all treated as one line for the purposes of sandhi, that's the word junction. The next word begins with a tad, even though in my rendering of it I've put a full stop. the next word, it's treated as part of the same group of words because they're part of one line of verse. One word ending in kuśalotsāha, it would be on its own. With visarga, as I'm underlining here. Next word begins with a T, and so it changes to S. Kuśalotsāhas tad vipaksha ka uchyate. So what is virya? It is the utsāha to do what is kuśala, or the utsāha towards the kuśala. Tad vipaksha ka uchyate. Tad means that. As a freestanding form, it is tat. The phrase om, tat, sat, om. That is the truth. That is what is real. Used here, tadvipaksha is as a prefix just means it. So it's vipaksha. It's opposite. It's an antithesis. Tadvipaksha ka uchyate. Vipaksha, you see ending in ah again. It's a masculine noun in the nominative singular. Ends in ah, followed by a ka, and so it stays as an ah. Tadvipaksha ka uchyate. Word paksha, I'm writing it in stem form here. The word paksha means a wing, and by extension, wing also means half of something, a component part of, I say half exactly, but a component part of something. The prefix vi very often has the meaning of, its basic meaning is splitting apart, away from. Not always, but that's the basic underlying meaning. So the vipaksha is the opposing part, the away part. So the counter-argument, the antithesis, the opposite side of it. So it could equally be translated as opposite rather than antithesis. So tadvipaksha, the antithesis of that, the antithesis of what? Of the kuśalotsāha. So the vipaksha, the counter wing, the opposing part, the opposite of kuśalotsāha. Ka uchyate, what is said? I mean, that is, what is it called? By the way, the word paksha seems to have a cognate relationship with the Latin word factio, and we have as faction. So faction, you have different factions, different opposing ideas. It could be cognate with that meaning of paksha. Now, ka uchyate. Uchyate, we have the root vach, meaning to say or to speak. Cognate with Latin word vox, vocal voice, and so on. The vach, you make a neuter noun out of it, an action noun. The vachanam, meaning speaking. The Buddha vachanam, the Buddha speaking, is the words of the Buddha. Buddha vachanam. It makes its passive. Well, the passive is normally formed, and this is regular, by adding a ya and the thematic endings yate. You'd normally expect to see, therefore, vachyate is said, is called, but by a process known as samprasarana, this vach is softened to an uch, so uchyate. And And for those who want to follow that up, you'll see it. I've made a note about it. It's in a MacDonnell footnote to paragraph 17. And as time goes on, I'll locate and give you references to other notes as well. Incidentally, you'll need to know that because, for example, vach would normally make its past participle by changing the vax to vak and adding ta, vakta. But by the same process of some prasarana, that vakta becomes ukta. Don't let it detain you too much now. All will become clear as we go along. So ka uchyate. Ka, it's the same word, but in the masculine form as the first word in this line. So kim viryam tadvipaksha ka uchyate. What is it called? Ka is in the masculine here because the ka refers to vipaksha. Tadvipaksha, its opposite. Ka uchyate. Again, santi, where you get a word ending in ah, a kah, with visarga, kah, followed by a vowel other than a short all that happens is that the the visarga drops off. So rather than kah uchyate, the kah drops off. That's why you have ka uchyate. So in its full form, kah uchyate, by santi ka uchyate. So tadvipaksha ka uchyate. Its opposite, what is called. What is it called? Alasyam. The next line now. Alasyam. Alasyam. Laziness or sloth. I've given an explanation, I think, oh yes, on the second page of the notes here. It's from a root las, originally to shine, and then by extension to move about, to move. And that makes an adjective lasa, moving hither and thither, lively. It can also mean shining, lively, moving. Just as we had the root ksham in the first verse, which makes the adjective kshama, forbearing, patient. So las makes the adjective lasa. It's a very common formation. Now negate that by the letter a, the negating a, the same as in Greek, and into English, of course. Moral, amoral, aerobic, anaerobic. There's an before a vowel, same as between Greek and Sanskrit. So alasa means non-lasa, unmoving. That means not getting a move on. So it came to mean indolent, idle, slothful, lazy. Now we make an abstract noun out of it. There are many ways, several ways in Sanskrit of making an abstract noun. The most common ones, you add on a thing like a ta on the end, or a tua at the end. But one common way of doing it is by strengthening, by vriddhi, we'll come to this shortly, strengthening the first vowel, or say the vowel of the first syllable. So strengthen it from a to a, cross off the last vowel and replace it by a ya. So from alasa, which is the adjective, unmoving, lazy, we get alasya. By the way, nouns formed like this are always neuter. So it's alasyam, laziness. Alasa, lazy. Alasyam, laziness. We'll encounter many of these as we go along. It's a very common way of forming abstracts. So it's tadvipaksha, its opposite is alasyam. Now we come to a series of words. Kutsita sakti vishadatmavam vishadatmavamanyana. Kutsita sakti. Kutsita means that which is despised or reviled, or that which is generally thoroughly disapproved of, as vile, nasty. Kutsita. That's from the root kuts, meaning to despise. This is the past participle of it. Kuts, to despise. Kutsita, as a past participle, despised, reviled. And asakti sorry, I accidentally shut down the system. Hope we're back now. Asakti, oops. Sorry, that was me being clunky with the technology again. Asakti, the root sanj, also alternative form saj. That root just means to stick, one thing sticking to another in the ordinary sense, something sticky, adhering. Then by extension, clinging to, and more particularly with the verbal prefix as, so asaj or asanj means to cling to something, like our clinging. Now, with many, indeed most roots ending in nj or a j or a ch, when you make a word by joining on a t or a ta to it with a t, that j or ch changes to the equivalent hard consonant, it changes to a k. So you don't have asajti but asakti. So asakti. Is from that same root. So it just means like the clinging to, not just sticking, but asakti, clinging onto it. This prefix is cognate with the Latin ad, meaning to or towards, onto. This j, k, or ch, k, in the same word, this flipping between one and the other, we have remnants of it in English. We have remnants, for example, it's done the other way around in English, in, for example, the verb speak with a K and the noun speech with a ch. We recognize that they're from the same origin, but we recognize speak as the verb and speech as the noun. Similarly, although the pronunciation of the vowel changes from the verb break with a K, we have breach with a ch, break and breach, from that same origin, effectively grammatical variations of the same word. We find the same kind of phenomenon happening, though much more frequently and regularly, in Sanskrit. So just hopefully, as you'll see, that speak and speech are effectively variants of the same word. So you'll see that sanj, saj, sakti, asakti, that kta, are just, it's variants of that same word. So kutsita sakti, kutsita asakti, by sandhi merging into kutsita sakti. So vile clinging. Doesn't mean the clinging is vile, it means clinging to what is vile. Kutsalotsāha. You'll see a footnote here at the bottom of the page, and BST, that's just another edition. It's written as asaktir. I'll explain the significance of that in a moment. So kutsalotsāha, vileness clinging, that is clinging to what is vile. Vishada, the root is sad, meaning to sit. Present tense is sidati. You get this a-e flip here. Same kind of thing in English. We get sit and sat and set and saddle. It's all from sit. So sad, to sit. It also has the meaning of just collapsing, as being unable to stand, collapsing, and despondency as well. But in vishada, vi with this prefix that we've just seen, here's the v of falling apart. It's kind of a negative connotation here. So you vishada, you're collapsing and falling apart. Incidentally, the v followed by sad, within the same word, where you get an s following a consonant other than a vowel other than an a or an a, it frequently changes to a sh. So you didn't say visad, but vishad. It's the same word. This is just a phonetic variation on the same word. And like many words with a short a and a single consonant in the root, you make the verbal noun by lengthening the a. So vishada, meaning despondency. And in fact, in the first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, you've got the Arjuna Vishada, the Arjuna despondency, where he falls into despair at the forthcoming battle against his kinsman, Vishada. So kutsalotsāha, clinging to what is vile. Vishada, despondency, despair. Atmavamanyana. Atma is self. The stem form is Atman. In its combining form, it becomes a short a. This little sign I'm putting over the a there, called the micron as opposed to the macron. The micron, the small, just indicates that the vowel is short. But by the way, we normally don't bother to write it, because if the vowel is written on its own, we understand a short vowel. But you do write it just to draw attention to the fact that it really is a short vowel here, not the long that you would expect. So Atman, stem form. The nominative, the masculine noun, the nominative is Atma. It loses the N. Yeah, so it loses the N and lengthens the A as the nominative form. And the combining form is Atma with a short A. So Atmavamanyana. Avamanyana, despising or holding in contempt. We can almost build an English word that sounds very close and would have the same meaning if it existed. Look, man, I wrote man, to think, or to hold an opinion of. You'll see it's the last note in the box following the analysis of the text of a manyana. So man, root to think. It's a class 4 verb, so it makes its present by the addition of the ya. See, manya. It's an atmanepada, a middle as opposed to an active. In conjugations, it's manyate, not manyati. So the verbal noun in ana, many verbal nouns just add ana, either to the root or to the stem. This ana is added to the present base stem. So manyana means minding or thinking. The prefix, the verbal prefix ava, is like down or off. In fact, this ava is cognate with our English off. Off, down, away. So, if avaman or avamanyate, to down think, as to treat with contempt, you can in English we talk about talking somebody down, belittling him by what you're saying, talking him down. Here, this is thinking yourself down. Atma avamanyana, self atma avamanyana, down thinking. In other words, belittling your own ability. Oh, I can't do this. Oh, I'm no good at that. Oh, I'm useless. That is atma avamanyana, self down thinking. Thinking about yourself in belittling terms. Thinking about yourself with contempt. So the avamanyana, if we translate that, the sound, off-minding, having a mind about yourself that throws you off. Down-minding, off-minding, off-thinking. Contempt. Now, I said that I would explain this footnote. Why is there a footnote saying the alternative of asakti in another text is given as asaktir? It's this. By the rules of sandhi, where you get a word that ends in I or long or short, with visarga, ich, if the following word begins with a vowel or a voiced consonant, that becomes ir. So if kutsita sakti is meant to be a full word on its own, I'll explain what I mean about that in a moment, it would on its own end in an I kutsita sakti. And so by sandhi joining to the following word beginning with a voiced consonant of v, it kutsita saktir vishadatma vamanyana. Kutsita saktir vi. Got it? Actirvi. Not activi, but actirvi. Linguistically, by the laws of the formation of compounds, either form is correct with slight difference of not even meaning, slight difference of sentence structure. Where you get compound words, only the last element of the compound actually declines as a noun. All of the other elements are in their stem form. And here I remind you, if you haven't seen it yet, please do see the video on the YouTube channel called Roots and Stems. It is actually quite important because you lose the thread if you haven't seen that and you don't know what we mean by roots and stems. So watch that one. So when you're combining a series of nouns into one compound noun, each of the nouns, apart from the last one, will be in its stem form, and only the last noun will have its fully declined form. There's nominative, accusative, instrumental, and so on. You can combine a series of nouns together into a compound, or adjectives. Various types of compounds, and it's quite a complex area of study in Sanskrit, and we will deal with it in detail, but it'll be enough to say here that you can make one type of compound. It's called a dvandva, just a pairing compound, which means that you just join a series of words together instead of saying and, you just miss out the and, which is what we do here. Kutsita sakti vishada atmavamanyana, which means kutsita sakti, clinging to what is vile, and vishada, despondency, and atmavamanyana, three separate nouns. By the rules of compounding in Sanskrit, you can either put a cha, meaning and, after each one. The cha follows the word, like the Latin que, meaning and. You can either put an and, or you can run it, string them together as one compound. So this is how one text puts this, one edition of the text. Kutsita sakti vishadatmavamanyana. Three nouns run into one. Another editor has treated kutsita sakti as a separately standing word, not part of the compound. Kutsita saktir vishada mavamanyana. In reality, it makes not the slightest bit of difference to the meaning. It's just a matter of style, how it's done. Both are entirely correct. Before we leave this verse, I just want to say a little bit more about utsāha. You'll see I put a note on it as well. This root sa carries within it the notion of struggle and overcoming obstacles. And as I mentioned, it's actually cognate with the German word Sieg, modern German Sieg, meaning victory, modern Icelandic Sigur, and Old English Siga, all meaning victory. The idea is that you've won, but it's by a struggle against difficulties, struggle against adversity and obstacles that you have won. The prefix, verbal prefix ut, is actually cognate with our English word out, but it more often has the meaning of up, so as in arising up out of something. For example, the very word arising, the common word for arising, utpada, as in dependent co-arising. In Pali, paticca samuppada, and in Sanskrit, praticca samutpada, is that utpada, the coming, the ut coming out, coming up, coming out, therefore arising. Also has the meaning of getting up. So the utsāha, as before, I mentioned the how the verbal noun, where you get a root with a short a followed by a single consonant, often makes a verbal noun by lengthening the a and making it so saha. So utsāha, here now we have the meaning of the struggle and the idea of putting some energy, getting up to struggle, getting up to fight and win. The utsāha, rousing yourself. So that's why it's often translated as endeavor. But remember, with this word, there's the idea of putting the effort into overcoming an obstacle. The saha, the Sieg, the Old English Siga, gaining a victory against the odds, of overcoming the obstacles. So kuśalotsāha, which by Sanskrit becomes kuśalotsāha, is the utsāha, getting up and fighting in the path of, or to do what is kuśala, to do what is wholesome and skillful. Right, that concludes the analysis. What I will do now, I will just read this verse to you in Sanskrit once more, and see if you can follow it without even looking at the text. Just follow it as I speak. In fact, I'll read it for you very slowly, twice. follow it as I speak it. And I'll speak it almost unnaturally slowly to make it easier to follow. Kim viryam kuśalotsāhas tadvipaksha ka uchyate alasyam kutsita vishādatmāvamanyana. I'll read that again. Kim viryam kuśalotsāhas tadvipaksha ka uchyate alasyam kutsita vishādatmāvamanyana. Now, I couldn't separate the words properly there without breaking the rules of sandhi, without breaking the rules of word joining. For example, it would be wrong to say vishāda atma avamanyana. So what I'll do, I'll read it a third time, this time breaking the words down without sandhi, following word by word, and then a final time putting them together with the correct word union, the word junction, the sandhi. Kim viryam kuśalotsāha tad vipaksha ka uchyate alasyam kutsita asakti vishāda atma avamanyana. And now once finally putting all the words together correctly as they're meant to go in Sanskrit. Kim viryam kuśalotsāhas tadvipaksha ka uchyate alasyam kutsita sakti vishādatmāvamanyana. And that brings us to the end of this video on chapter 7, verse 2.